Good morning. How are you guys? Think I am ready. How about you guys? Got my pins, got my pattern. Can you all hear me? I just want to make sure I start this on a good foot, so just let me know if you can hear me. I got a new microphone, and I'm hoping that the quality will be a lot better with it. It's not attached to me now, and I don't have to charge it. So that was my strategy. Let's see if I can adjust the camera here as well. I think that looks a little better. Do you guys like it up higher, like more, or do you want, I want you to be able to see my presser foot and my needle. If I get too close, then you just see this really tiny little bit of my machine table. And if I raise it up too high, it gets kind of far away from the needle. So, all right, I'm going to hope you guys can hear me. And we are going to start. So I'm making the Charlie Caftan. I signed up for the Needle Sharp subscription box, which someone tagged me in once. And I was like, this is kind of a great idea. It's a subscription box where you get a project every month, and there are 3 different levels, and I'm not sure if the levels are only based on price or if they're ability or if they truly are what they're titled: lightweight, medium weight, and heavyweight. It's not a heavyweight fabric. I think it's more involved, so if you get the heavyweight, it's more of an involved project as opposed to the lightweight. And for the first one I signed up for was the Charlie Caftan, and which happened to be the heavyweight box. And so now I'm signed up for all of the heavyweight boxes to come. And you get to pick your fabric. There are 3 options of fabric choice for each level. So she's coming up with 9 different fabrics. Rayon, got your YouTube account. My throat is acting really funny today. Sorry, guys. And each month she'll release the next project that we're going to be working on. So the next one that I'll get in the mail is a sweatshirt, sweater dress, kind of all in that realm. So the 3 different options were kind of in that realm. And the one after that is button-up shirts. And actually this shirt right here, the Aster by Colette, is her lightweight box, and I had just made, when I saw her post, I was like, oh, I have that pattern. I've been meaning to make that. It's a really simple sew, went together really quickly. So that was kind of nice. The heavy, I think one of them is the Grain Line Studio Archer, which is the medium weight, and then the heavyweight, which is the one I'll be getting, is a full-on button-down dress, which I am down for because I like dresses, and I've been looking for that perfect day dress, so that kind of 40s day dress look, the hourglass shape. I like a set-in waist. I like a bodice with sleeves. That's kind of my cup of tea. So, all right. Well, this Charlie Caftan has this inset panel right here with gathers coming from it, and I'm not gonna lie. When I saw how to sew that, I was like, oh shoot, I have to do that live on camera and with rayon and on an industrial machine. Well, I guess I'm here for the adventure. So I hope you guys are too, and you're forgiving of me because I have never made this garment before. I've never actually sewn anything by Closet Case. I'm pretty sure they make the ginger jeans, which I have, and I have denim, and I have everything ready. I just haven't had the time to make it. This is my loop turner, which is going to make the ties. Let me show you the back view of this. Hopefully you can see there's little ties. I'm making the full view. The full view has gathers in the waist panel. The what do they call the small one, or the shorter one? They have a kind of a cute name for it. Let's see. Oh, mini caftan. It's called the mini caftan. It has darts or gathers. So there were 3 lovely fabric choices, and I picked this rayon print, and it's by Anna Rifle Bond. I think made by Cotton and Steel. So, all right, guys. So here's my pattern pieces. Set my loop turner aside. Got my facings all stacked up. This is my waist panel, which I need right off the bat. These are the ties. It's my first step. These are the pockets. I was gonna say there's no sleeves. So, what was that? And then here's my dress. I think this is my front and my back. I usually stack it up in front and then back, and also in the little bundles of things, and sometimes in the order I'm going to sew it. That way I don't have to have my pattern pieces sitting here, which kind of get in the way. Sometimes I need them, absolutely. I have them here sitting next to me waiting. But in this case, there's very few pattern pieces. I was I'm not going to lie, I was dreading cutting this out because I don't like cutting rayon out because it tends to stick to my table when I'm rotary knifing it, because I don't have a self-healing mat. They didn't make self-healing mats to fit my size table at the time, so I got a sheet of plastic basically that's almost 1/4 of an inch thick. It was a really affordable way to do it. But it's not self-healing, so there are like micro grooves in my plastic all over the place, and sometimes they snag fabrics like this. This fabric is a really lovely weight, and it didn't snag at all, so I was pretty excited about that. We're looking at this upside down. So look at this kooky pattern piece. Okay. This, can you see this? Okay, so let's see. This is the sleeve, shoulder. This is the sleeve opening right here. This is the neckline right here. And then this is the waist. So this is the center front seam, and then you gather this up and put this little panel over it like that. And you're seeing half the view, obviously, as well. I'm also going to do French seams because a lot of people don't have sergers, and it'll just be a much nicer finish on this rayon. So I have my little pins here because there are dots on the pattern markings, and those are the pivot points for the panel. This is sewn at 5/8 inch seam allowance, which is quite big. So I just need to remember to do that because I typically do 1/2 inch or 1/4 for my things. So I just poked my pins in. This is my little method, and then I pull it apart. And now I have it. And so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to stay stitch around this little box. I did read the directions. I skimmed them pretty thoroughly since this is not a pattern that I'm comfortable sewing yet. I haven't made it before. So let's see. I'm gonna kind of guess where 5/8 is there and just be consistent, right? Ooh, it just seems so huge. I'm a little nervous. Okay. Has anyone else made this here? Any tips appreciated? Actually using pins. This is rare, I know, but in garment sewing, I do use a lot of pins. Okay, I don't back tack when I stay stitch, especially since there's a chance I may want to remove that stay stitching later, and it'll be easier just to pull it out, like just pull the top thread or the bottom thread, just one or the other, and then the whole thing will just slip out, especially on a fabric like this. I've gone through different phases of sewing since I learned how to sew. I think a lot of sewists do that. Maybe because they want to sew an item because they want to own it. Maybe they want to do the technique because they're just like, wow, how do I do that? I read this really great article by a knitting designer named Franklin Habit about, like, are you a process or a product knitter? And I thought that was really interesting because I am indeed a process sewer. I really like challenging myself, or just because I like to top stitch, I'll pick something that needs to be top stitched a lot. And I'm a product knitter. Like, I want that sweater, so that's why I knit it. So it is kind of interesting. And I do admit, like, in sewing, I'm also a product sewer as well. But I have gone through different phases where I got on a welt pocket phase and perfected my welt pockets and then kind of never sewed them again. And I kind of dread that coming up. I don't really want to sew a welt pocket. And this kind of reminds me of sewing a welt pocket because you basically have to sew this panel in. I thought you edge stitched the panel like a patch pocket on there, but no. Why is Do you guys see that little video stutter, or is that me? Let me see. Oh yeah, you see that? What is that? Wow, I haven't seen that before. I'm gonna see if I can plug something in a little better. You see that? Just a second. Right back. Did that help? I don't even know if I did anything. Yeah, that was a yikes for sure, right? Yeah, my mic started doing something really weird yesterday, the little portable one I use. Like, it started getting crackly just intermittently, and it would cut out, and I was like, it's charged, so I don't know why it's doing that. And I thankfully had ordered a new one last week. Oh, see there, it's coming back again. I hope this doesn't interrupt our stream today. I'm watching the playback. You guys are a little bit just after me. That's why I'm seeing. All right, I'm going to continue on a little bit because I'm so pumped to sew this that we're going to see. Okay, so my next step is to put in a line of gathering stitches. I'm going to try and keep an eye on it to see if it keeps going because I don't want to put you guys through that. And I'm going to do it just inside the seam line, but barely. This is actually a little wide. I can tell. This looks way bigger in person than in the directions. I don't back tack. And I used to, I got kind of cocky as a sewer, like we do. And I started to only put in one line of gathering stitches when I needed gathering stitches. That was fine in some cases, but it was a bad choice in a lot of other instances, especially like a skirt to a bodice. Because what I find is when you only have one row of stitches, and maybe I can show you, you always want to pull like the top or the bottom, just pick and stay consistent on the thing you're doing. So if you pull one row of gathering stitches, make sure I'm actually in the camera there. So you get the gathers, but you see how this like ruffles and wants to kind of hide back here like that? When you do two rows, it makes that behave and lay flatter, and it is a little easier to deal with, especially if you're pulling them both at the same time. And I didn't adjust the length of my stitches because I don't want to forget to put it back, and I know this fabric is loose enough that I'll be able to still pull my gathering stitches. So it looks like that little stutter went away, did it? That's so weird. Hi, Allison. Nice to see you. All right, so I'm gonna pull my gather stitches. Yeah, so see, two rows creates a nice flat portion right here, right? Which makes the gathers that are going down into the garment, they just lay a little bit nicer, and they're a little lovelier to look at. And they also behave better when you go to sew your garment together, the seam that's going to encase those gathers. Hi, Janice. No, I am actually following the directions. Oh, I forgot to do the waist tie. That's the only thing I've skipped so far, but I will do that. So the first step was to reinforce the little edge right here, the corners of this waist panel. And then, yes, stutter seems to be gone. Yay. No kidding. I'm not good at technology, you guys. I mean, like, I'll stumble through it, but I'm a sewer. All right, so Janice, I did look at the directions. I do tend to not follow the directions when I sew a pattern, but with you guys, I'm going to try and follow it as close as possible so that I'm not doing something that you wouldn't encounter in the same way. Which one's my gathering stitch? Having trouble seeing it as opposed to the stay stitching. What did you notice, Elena? Did the stutter start again? I hope not. Please tell me it didn't start. I think about those like podcasts, like Rayanne here. She listens to a lot of podcasts that like start out and then they get really popular. I've seen this a few times, and then they need like a techie person, and then some hapless person kind of in their life to get stuck doing that. That's what I need. I need a hapless techie person who wants to sit here and watch me do sewing videos and then just make sure everything's running smoothly. Okay. So I'm not actually looking to see how much I need to gather yet. I'm going to do it evenly, and then I'm going to get my little waist panel piece. Yeah, this is how it is, Janice. Exactly. The only thing I haven't done yet is sew the waist tie, which is sitting right here. And I'll do that in a second. I kind of like this step because it's pretty involved. It's on my mind. So I kind of want to get it out of the way. All right. So now here's my bodice, right? There is my front seam right there. Sorry. Oh, I'm kind of, see? So now we're bridging the gap. See, they're getting closer together now. So it's starting to look like something. And it is the interfacing piece. At least the right and the wrong side of this fabric is pretty easy to see. I did not use a fusible interfacing. I'm not a fan of fusible interfacing, don't get me wrong. Oh, I also need to clip the dots. I was waiting to do that right before I sewed it. So when you cut out a garment, say, I don't want to cut my gathering threads either, so I'm pushing this out of the way. I'm sorry the thread actually matches for once. Okay, so when you cut something out, this is my big advice. It took me a long time to figure out. I did do 2 rows of stitches, Helena. They're there. Can you see that? 1 and 2 right there. When you're not going to sew that garment right away, I recommend waiting to cut it out if you can until but sometimes we just don't know, right? All of a sudden, the kid wakes up from their nap, or I'm going to get some of my gather stitches out of the way before I clip this. So I really don't want to clip my gathering stitches. I really need them there just in case. But if you have a fabric that's really fussy, I recommend stay stitching certain edges like necklines, any tricky bits of sewing like this, like if this called for in a pattern and this is the tricky fabric, I totally recommend stay stitching that before you set that garment down if you're not going to get to sew it for a while, because sometimes fabric has a tendency to relax once it's been cut and it grows a little bit. And I don't know who is fraying the edges of fabric when I'm not sitting there. I feel like there's a little troll in there kind of rubbing all the edges of my fabric and making them all like thready and a pain to deal with. But that, like, see all this, like, I feel like I come back and I'm like, what happened, you know? So that's my tip, is if you're not going to sew it for a while, do at least your stay stitching, or don't cut it out until right before, especially knits, because knits tend to, some knits, the edge rolls up. And if, like when I cut out knits, I almost cut them immediately. I mean, I sew them immediately, because those rolled edges can be a really big pain. All right, so I always sew gathers into something on the gather side. I'm gonna make sure my fabric is actually going. So this is a one-way print, but either direction looked good. And so I picked it with the little pink ferns facing this way. So I want that to go like that, right? Like that. Okay. See, now you can see my 2 rows of stitches a little better, and I'll actually be able to evenly distribute them a little better as well. So I'm trying to keep the weight of this dress from pulling it off of my surface, but it's really hard. I'm going to, okay, so there's a notch right there. I know that that's where my little pin goes, like that. Yeah, see my stay stitch, I know that this started off a little too farther than 5/8 of an inch. And so I'm going to actually correct that, and then I'm going to take out my stay stitching. All right. How do I decide just the direction? Whatever you like. Yeah. I mean, I liked it both ways, but sometimes like on this one, these little like pink branches, they stick out on the fabric a little bit more in person. Like I think on the camera, they look a little more subdued, but in person, they are a little bit brighter. My eye went to them, and I think like for me, I wanted those to look right side up. All right. So I'm going to anchor my ends. Remember, guys, I've never sewn this before. I know I sound like I know what I'm doing, but I've never made this. So I didn't base the interface. I didn't. Do you want me to do that? I probably should. It'd probably be happier later, huh? I didn't, though. And in this case, I kind of wish I would have pulled my gathering stitches from the back side. That way, it would be easier to adjust. Where are my gathering stitches? Okay, so I didn't gather it enough. That's okay. That's why we pinned it, right? Yeah, so Allison, this pattern, the garment, this is a subscription box I got. I don't know if you heard that beginning part, but it came with fusible interfacing, and so you wouldn't have to baste it if you were actually following the what came with it. I am just not a fan of fusible interfacing. It's just a personal preference. Somewhere along the line, I worked for an amazing seamstress or two, and they tainted my view on it. I don't remember which one it was or who it was, but I do have this feeling of like, I tend to sew with a lot of natural fibers, and gluing my natural fibers, I don't know, it just feels a little bit unnatural, you know? So, all right, so here we go. What do you guys think? Should we do it? All right, so the start and stop point is this pivot point. So I'm going to just open this out so you can kind of see, because I've seen the directions and you probably haven't. So you see this little pivot point right there. Can you guys see that? It's a little, that's where my stay stitching is. This is the corner of my gathered edge, or my like little seam here, and where that little waist panel is going to sit in a rectangular block across the waist. It's awesome watching it go in like cold, huh? It doesn't feel that way. This is the first time I've been a little shaky, you guys. I really want this dress. I don't have enough fabric to cut out another one. I don't have a backup plan. I don't usually sew without a backup plan. But you know what? This is it, right? We're in this together. I want my gathers to go a little bit farther that way. So, all right, I always pin perpendicular to the seam. I'm going to adjust that. Don't worry about it, okay? I know it doesn't look straight. I like to get it under the needle, and then that holds it down. I'm going to make sure all my fabric is actually on the table. This is another tip. I always put the fabric of the garment on the table. Otherwise, it's pulling it off. And some things that are really heavy are pulling your needle and slightly bending them, and then it creates a misalignment with your needle going down into the bobbin area, and you have a greater chance of hurting the machine, breaking the needle, and hurting yourself. So I try not to pull against my needle ever. All right, I'm also gonna straighten this out as best I can, like that. I'm gonna put my needle right there at the box, and I'm gonna back stitch. I'm going for it. And I'm going to line this up a little better. Make sure my gathers are evenly distributed the best I can. I'm actually going to ignore some of my stay stitching block because I didn't get that seam allowance very good. I don't sew at 5/8 very often, so seeing it on my machine wasn't good. I'm also, when I put these gathers in, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to pull them straight down because that's how we want them to hang on the garment. And I find, like, I've just learned over time that they hang better when I do that. And I'm also going to stitch as close to that stitching, my gather stitch line as possible. But I will probably remove that afterward. But I'm going to do as close as possible without going through it or going to the right of it, because I don't want it to show on the other side. Remember, everything to the right of the seam line is inside the garment, left is showing on the outside. So you just definitely want to make sure. I'm just kind of making sure that this is evenly distributed. This is already feeling a lot easier to sew than I thought it would be, you guys. I'm feeling okay, but you know what? This is the easy part. I feel like turning the corner and getting this square on there really nicely is the key. And I'm really glad that this fabric is pretty forgiving in the print. Is going to show, kind of hide any little discrepancies. It's also going to drape really nicely. It's a really lovely rayon, you guys. I'm pretty excited about it. Okay, so I have a little notch right here, and I have one right here. Can you see those? There's a notch here and here, because there was a dot on the pattern right there. And instead of marking this, I just did that so I knew roughly where I want this juncture to be. And I'm going to move it up a little bit more. I have to admit, if I were sewing this without you watching, I probably wouldn't be as precise. I would just make the adjustment somehow later. But I do want to sew this properly. I'm going to make sure my gathering stitch is here. So see, I'm pulling my gathering stitches and gathering it up. And this happens a lot. Like, say, because my gathering stitches don't go all the way here where they do, but it doesn't gather, what I do is I just gather it a little bit like this with a pin when I get close to it. Like, and then I try and get individual little gathers there that look like the others. Okay. You certainly wouldn't want to get a fold there. Back stitch. All right. Now, do you want to see it, or can I just keep going? Oh, I need to do my ties next. So far, so good. Can I stop now? All right, I'm going to do my ties, because now I put the ties in as I do the edge of the little panel. All right. I have to admit, I really don't like sewing ties. And this is a little narrow for me, but like for a tie, but I'm just going to do it. You know what? Like I said, I'm treating this as a wardrobe building thing, even of things that maybe I wouldn't typically have picked out or had on my radar. This one's definitely been on my radar, but truth time, I don't typically sew garments that don't have a set-in sleeve. This is a caftan. So caftans are built on what's called a kimono block, not a bodice block. And kimonos blocks, but what I mean by that is when you think of a kimono, it only has a shoulder seam and an underarm seam, right? It doesn't have a seam here where the sleeve is. And so when that kimono is being worn, that shoulder seam is all that's got. It's the only anchor you have is that and this underarm seam. It's just not enough. So what happens is your kimono goes like this. It kind of tilts back and chokes you. And that's, you see those classic geishas wearing the kimono, and it's kind of tilted back, and then the collar of the kimono is like kind of part way down their back. That is a style thing. That is what it's meant to do. That's how they wear it. And I don't like that feeling. I have a thing about things touching my neck. I just don't like it. And I understand, like, it's less intimidating to sew something that doesn't have a set-in sleeve, but I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to sew a lot of set-in sleeves here, and we're not going to be intimidated by it, because it's such the difference of having a garment that fits you really well is if you can get the sleeve and the shoulder area to fit you really well, all the rest is a lot easier, and you're going to be more committed to figuring out that bust and that waist area. We tend to make a garment bigger when we have a bigger bust or a bigger waist, and then that makes the shoulders just too wide, and then it doesn't fit us, and the whole thing just feels bad, So what I do is I make sure my shoulders and my sleeve fit me really well, and maybe I cut out a smaller size up there. Ooh, it started stuttering then, didn't it? I don't know what that is, you guys. I'm really sorry. I hope it stops. Okay, I'm going to trim those little bits right there. And then I have this really great tool called a loop turner. Can you see it has a little hook with a little moving, can you see that? This moves. It's like a little hinge. And so I put it in here. And you have to poke it through really gently. Or actually, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just grab. So I'm putting the fabric in the hook, and then I'm going to close it on itself. Actually, I'm going to go through the seam because I don't want it to stop in the middle. So there you go. See it? We're going to grab it. And then this is the trick, just getting it started. But on this fabric, it's going to be really easy. You just slide it like this. Have you guys ever seen one of these before? They're really great. Okay, and when I get the fabric out, I take this out now. There's no reason to keep pulling it. And as long as I have this little anchor right here, I keep going. And don't pull from here, because when it bunches up right here, it'll get stuck and then it won't go. So you want to just slide easily. If this were quilting cotton on this narrow, it probably wouldn't slide this nicely. But the rayon is really easy to deal with. Okay, so there's one of my ties. And I'm going to fix this little spot where my little hook was. I'm going to pull out my corners. I'm going to push in where my hook was. Try and even this out a little bit and kind of make that fabric relax back to the way it was sewn. Remember, I clipped my corners so that I have a better chance of it becoming a corner. And this is a tie, you know, so. Rayan definitely has seen one. We use them to turn the handles of our clear wristlets. And when our factory started sewing those briefly, they would get stuck on that part. They were like, can we just edge stitch this? And then I was like, wait a minute, aren't you using these things? They had actually come up with this really clever way to get around it. Oh, I almost forgot to turn. I'm going to clip this and clip this on my corners. Not all the way there, just almost there. Poke it through my seams like that. Put it in the hook. And then I make sure the little thing closes. Get it started really gently. I just do a little bit and then I pull. It's like magic. It feels really nice when it goes smoothly. Pull it out when I get it. This, otherwise, without one of these, it can take a really long time. Okay, and then I'm going to repair my little tie right now. And now we are ready to do our next step. And typically I would probably iron the tie right now, but I'm not going to worry about it. I can iron it later. When I put the tie in, I'm going to put the seam down. So when it's on my body, the seam is pointing at the ground. Just so you guys know if you can't see that. All right. So where are we at? All right. So we are at these corners here. And let's just lay it out so we can see what's happening. This is our little opening that we're doing. Let's see. Like that. And I'm gonna lay my tie in there. I'm gonna pin it like this. That's the bottom. The gathers are the bottom, so I'm gonna do this. I'm just gonna lay it on there kind of in the middle. And I'm gonna pin sort of away from it like this. Just get my pin out of the way like that. Oh, and I was saying earlier, I always pin perpendicular to the seam because that way I can just sew right over the seam without danger of getting the pin caught in the feed dogs, and the needle will typically just glide right off the edge of the needle of the pin if you happen to come in contact with it. I think I'm going to pin this one as well because I might just keep going when I get on a roll. Yeah, a safety pin does take a lot longer, Christina. If you know, like we all get those 40% off coupons at Joann Fabrics or your whatever fabric store you're using, And I just highly recommend like picking those weird little tools up on those. Like I got a pinking shear rotary blade once. I was just remembering that the other day. I would never buy that rotary blade otherwise, but it, you know, because I hardly ever use it, but it's kind of fun to have when I'm not. All right, I'm going to right now fold this in half. I'm going to mark my center so that when I'm sewing it, I know where I want that tie to go. That's how I do it. That little notch is really far away from where the seam line will be. It's not going to hurt anything. I could have snipped inside, but because I was folding it in half, that was a really positive way to know that that is the center. I'm going to do it again over here. Because I didn't really necessarily pin at the seam line. I just pinned it so that it's away from the seam line like that. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. All right, and I'm actually going to start back where I was sewing and turn the corner again. And I'm doing that because I feel like it's really a positive way to know that I made a 90-degree corner, and I actually caught in the start and stop point of the original seam. Oh, sorry, it's stuttering again, isn't it? Oh my God, you guys, I don't know what that is. I'll figure it out. And then I'm going to start sewing, and I have my stay stitch as a guide. Okay, and see, this is another tip. I'm going to make this go like this so that it's as flat as possible when I get to this corner. And then I'm going to turn. And this is why you wanted to needle down too when you pivot like this. This is also why you wanted to make sure that when you clip into that corner that you get it. Oh, you guys, I can't continue. I have to do my upper seam. That's right. Sorry. This is not something I've ever done before. Okay, we're going to back stitch here. We're going to sew our bodice seam right now like this. Okay, so I'm going to do French seams up here. So I need to do my center front bodice seam, otherwise I can't encase it into the waist seam. Did you guys catch that? I almost did that. All right. So my first pass through is going to be at 1/4 inch because it's a 5/8 inch seam. Wrong sides together. I just uploaded a quick video on sewing French seams yesterday. I'm going to trim these little threads because this is rayon, man. It just wants to do that. I'm going to try not to touch it very much because those are the things that poke through your French seam that make it look kind of icky. And normally what you would do is you would press the seam open. I'm going to just finger press it like this. Finger press it. And then you would iron it again along that seam, and it wants to fold right along that seam when you've pressed it open first. Okay, now I'm going to do 3/8 of an inch seam for my final seam for my French seam. I'm pulling the fabric so that it is right on the edge. And I don't have any fabric creeping onto the top or creeping to the back. Just like this. Straight as possible. All right, now we can carry on with our waist seam. All right. Where were we? We were over here. All right. And again, I'm actually going to put my needle onto the original spot I was at and just re-sew it a little bit. So I make sure, because if I didn't do that and I just started on the next side, what could happen is I would have a hole at that corner, right? You know, right there. Okay, so pivot. And here is the moment of truth. I'm going to come across the front here, and I'm going to hope that this all lines up, right? Ooh, and it feels really tight, honestly. I wonder if this isn't 5/8 inch seam. It said it is. But that is not going to make it. You see that? Oh, yes, 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 yes. It will. It'll make it. It'll make it. Okay. Okay. I'm going to press this seam one side. Where's my little knot? There it is. Okay. Right there. And this is where it starts getting tricky because you start losing some of the place where you can maneuver. Needle down, pivot, and here's my last moment of truth. Does that make it? So you want to make sure you're not getting any of the underside in there as well. I'm kind of pulling like this, making sure I only feel my band in there and the front dress. I can feel my pin right here, holding my tie. Hopefully my tie is still centered. I'm kind of sad now if it isn't. And I'm going to pivot again here and make sure I don't have any holes there. Alright, you guys. I'm going to see if all these corners are clipped well enough so that I have a nice edge. Alright, let's see how I did. I'm a little nervous. Let's take out my pids. Ooh la la. What do you guys think? Oh my god, the video is doing something crazy. Why did I have to do this on this dress? I do not know why that is doing that, you guys. I'm really sorry. I'm waiting for it to finish. It's not finishing. Dang, my little moment of truth just spoiled by technology, of course. Let me see if I can... You know what, you guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop streaming and I'm going to start again and see if that helps. So I'll be right back, okay?